Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Gatekeepers. This week, we're going to be discussing non-villainous adversaries. Sometimes the bad guy is, well, not a bad guy, but just a, regular NPC having likely the worst day or series of events happening to them. So in this episode, we're going to discuss how we approach these non-villainous adversaries. What led them from normal everyday NPC role to, well, being in opposition of the party. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel and the channels linked in the video description below, as it helps us grow and helps us get our thoughts and ideas out to the general public. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please make sure to hit that like button, as it helps the channel and tells us that you've liked the content. If you don't like the content, that's fine too. You can hit the dislike button. I invite you to do so. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. My name's Jaide, and I realize my studio light's not on, so I'll fix that in a little bit. But with me this evening is the crafting gamer. Hello, sir. Let me take you off mute, or there we go. And I've got with me Shadow of Shadow and Sun, and I've also got MarHawkman.
Good evening, everyone.
So, non-villainous adversaries. It's kind of a topic we've been bouncing around for the last 2 weeks, and it's definitely something I think many game masters could include more of. Oh, hey, Flatey, how you doing? How was Gen Con? Gen Con, while I'm waiting for, people to come in, Gen Con was pretty interesting this year. There were a few minor setbacks, but overall it was pretty good con. One of the largest setbacks that I think happened was the launch of a certain game that I will not name, because it was done in such a way that people got hurt, and it wasn't well planned by the individuals who were running it. From what I understand, like the series of events that led up to it led to people getting hurt, and that is never okay. Steps. Yeah, at the convention. Steps were taken.
I don't mean to interrupt.
That.
I can't hear anything, so I'm going to drop out of the studio for a minute and come back in.
Okay.
For a second, you're talking about the PlayStation thing.
No. At Gen Con, so people, there were individuals who got hurt. I don't know how seriously. And that's not something that I could possibly condone. So whatever happens with that game that, everyone was in such a mad rush about, I'm not going to care. I'm not even going to talk about it or cover it beyond this. In fact, I won't even name it. It has lost my respect because of the individuals who were, doing those things. So, but yeah, no, Gen Con was awesome. If people, want to get out there and experience new board games, which I've got some behind me, including Nightfall over my shoulder. Great game. Get out there and experience new board games and experience tabletop roleplay. I tried to experience 2 different tabletop roleplays, and one of them was not a resounding success, but I got to learn Earth Dawn. Take a drink, everyone. And then the other one I was denied entry to because they didn't say explicitly that there was a part A and a part B, and I had signed up for part B not knowing I needed to play part A first. So, oh well. So anyway, so how's everyone else's week going? I know my week was kind of full and crazy, but Shadow, how's your week?
Awesome. It's always awesome.
Fantastic.
Living the dream, man.
Living that retired life. What about you, Mar? How's your week going?
Well, a little weird, but not, particularly hectic. Like, one of the things I've done so far this week was tree branch removal of a dead, just a dead tree branch, but I removed it with a stick, not a saw.
That sounds oddly difficult. And
Well, it's
needless
one of
to
those
say-
things where you use the stick to drape a piece of cord over the tree
yeah.
branch until it just falls out of the tree. Thing
Right.
is, the branch weighs several hundred pounds, and you want to be careful not to get.
You want to be away from that. Right. So, crafting, how you doing, man?
Better. I can hear now.
Awesome. That's always awesome. So, are we ready to talk about non-villainous adversaries?
Sure.
I am.
Awesome. So, let's get into the first question, shall we? So, when deciding to use non-villainous NPC as the antagonist, where do you even begin? And Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one. So, where do you start the process of developing a non-villainous adversary?
Well, to be honest, either I don't, or it's because the players are, I run a game that's an evil campaign. I've been running it for over 20 years. So that's everybody, they're the bad guys. So it's everybody. Otherwise, I have to be very careful because players that I've come across literally don't trust a single NPC ever for any reason whatsoever. They just assume at some point or another they're going to be stabbed in the back by the local barkeep, the paper boy, the city commissioner, whatever. They don't trust anybody, and them's the break.
Okay. So I will, I guess, toss this one down to MarHawkman. Where do you start the planning for a non-villainous NPC?
Well, for me, it's a simple question of what kind of adventure is it? Is your goal to go kill somebody, or is your goal to say investigate something that happened? Because if you're not there to kill someone and you just happen to run into someone and who's not immediately hostile to you, then you have a reason to do something other than immediately kill them.
Do you run a lot of
That's fair.
assassin games?
What?
Do you run a lot of assassin games?
No, not really.
Okay, I just find that go kill someone to imply.
Well, not assassination, but like, oh hey, there's a bunch of goblins raiding that town over there, and we want you to go do something about it.
Oh,
That's the sort of thing I had
those
in
aren't
mind.
those are some things. Sorry.
But it's that sort of logic. It's like if it's a situation where you don't have a clear and present danger, having random NPCs show up who aren't a clear and present danger, that gives you a reason to do something with the NPCs other than making them obviously a friend or obviously an enemy.
If you could safely do that, MarHawkman, I say you actually have good players.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What about you, Crafting? How do you, or when do you decide to use the non-villainous NPC? So I think I skipped ahead one moment. When deciding to use a non-villainous NPC as the antagonist, where do you like to start?
This one I have to definitely agree with MarHawkman a little bit. It kind of depends. Like, I've done this 3 or 4 times. I think 4 times actually. The 2 main ones that are coming to mind was what I'd consider a character responsible nemesis. He blamed them for something they did do, but he wasn't necessarily evil. He just wanted to get a form of justice. Unfortunately, he had a dark version of justice.
Okay.
And then the other time that I did this was a misunderstood character. The character himself was doing, by our standards, villainous acts, but he was an alien and acting in both what he believed in a self-defensive manner, as well as acting in ways that does not affect his normal thought process. Like, for example, he was, for lack of a better term, grew up on a communist planet. He could just take things like food and things like that, things you need to survive, and no one would say anything to you. It isn't until you start getting unnecessary pieces of equipment or things like that that you actually have to pay on his world. So things like that. And he ended up killing someone solely by accident. But this is where I start agreeing with Shadow, because in both cases, the players were like, oh, it's only a matter of time before he betrays us or does something that we don't like, so we're just going to finish him off.
Okay. Yeah. That murder hobo mentality.
The whole game, well, yeah, the whole game mentality and aspect of the hobby requires that the players be on their toes at all times, depending on their particular GM. There's so many out there that are just looking for them to slip up even just a little bit, and at any opportunity, any NPC can, administer the coup de grace.
I mean, it's the a TTRPG equivalent of having an itchy trigger finger, and you run into that with a lot of players.
Yeah. So when deciding to use a non-villainous NPC as my antagonist, some of the things that I consider, I go back to some of my, classical literature. Robin of Locksley, he was non-villainous, but he was the antagonist to the law of the, of the country. The lawmen of the country were collecting taxes, whether or not they were doing it fairly. He was still an antagonist to them. He was stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. He was still an antagonist to, again, the lawful, the law-abiding, or the rather lawmen of the area. And anyone who would have been sent. He was a hero from one perspective, not from both sides of the fence. So if, let's say, for example, the Sheriff of Nottingham, you've just rolled into Nottingham, you know nothing of the politics, you don't know the story of Robin, and you roll in, and the sheriff says, hey, I have this bandit hiding out in the woods. He keeps hitting my tax wagon going through. I need you to deal with this guy. Whatever means possible, whatever you want to do, I need this problem resolved. The party gets out there, and suddenly they're facing down what in the people's mind is a champion, a hero of the people. What are the players supposed to do with that?
That is a very interesting one, yeah, because it's a matter of making a decision of whether you want to continue your original mission or redefine your mission, I guess.
And we have James has joined the panel. Welcome, James.
Little side question I have for that, though,
Hey,
is
what's up, Danny?
how long, if ever, does the players find out they killed someone they might not wanted to have?
Well, they'll find out in the end if they killed someone that they shouldn't have, and it's just a matter of time. But at the same token, like if you present the adversary in such a way that they're not acting villainous, they are not portraying themselves as the bad guy. They are basically telling people, hey, I'm not the bad guy here. Here's what's actually going on. It's then on to the players to decide whether or not to be murder hobos.
Yeah, that is true.
They have to figure out if they want to be the ones responsible for killing Robin Hood or not.
Right. So, James, I think this is the first time I've had you on my stream for Gatekeepers. Welcome.
Thank you. You've invited me, but for some reason, I generally am doing something else. But I thought, I'd just run here and say hi.
Yeah, welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
So the topic tonight is non-villainous adversaries. So I'm going to give you a chance to answer the first question then. When deciding to use a non-villainous NPC as an antagonist, where do you like to start?
I like to start with a opposing thief that wants the same thing the group wants. He's not necessarily evil. One thing I will say when I'm running D&D, and also lately in my Warhammer game, is I love using opposing parties. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's just it's a really good thing. Plus the players, you know, if you say you see 6 orcs or something, they're like, okay, whatever, right? But then if it's well, you enter the room and you see a guy in plate armor and a guy with pointy hat, you know, all of a sudden it gets a lot different because they don't know what's going on. But yeah, I like the whole both people are after the same MacGuffin, but neither one of them are necessarily bad. You know,
Sure.
that leaves negotiation as an option. You know?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the moral quandaries of opposing forces. If I present my players with a moral choice, like, well, are we now the bad guys, or are they still the bad guys? Like, who is the bad guys? Are there even bad guys? I love doing that to my players because if I do that from the start, I curb the murder hobo-ness of the game to a certain extent. So that's where I like to start, you know, especially with like early missions. You know, they get out there and they realize not the whole world is not actually against them. The whole world is trying to achieve their own individual goals beside the NPCs. Like they're not even concerned about the player characters half the time. So that's where I like to start.
Nice.
So moving on to the, well, moral quandaries of the issue, I'm going to start with MarHawkman on this one. What kinds of moral quandaries do you like to put in place for the players to navigate, and why?
Well, in the specific example I chose, it was a scenario I wrote where the people that you are there to investigate actually have what turns out to be largely a heroic reason for being there. They want to stop an invasion from a fourth party. I say fourth party because of the fact that the reason that their presence was secret is because someone who actually is your enemy talked them into doing it. And that was the entire reason why you have no idea what's going on, is because someone who's your enemy talks someone who's your ally into doing something you don't know about. And then when you found out about it, you show up to try and figure out what's going on.
And then you're stuck wondering whether or not you've got to deal with your ally. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving down to crafting. So what kind of moral quandaries do you put in front of your players, and why do you do so?
The kind of moral quandaries I'll say try is, like I said in Gatekeepers, none of it ever really worked out well. On the Gatekeepers, yeah, I said Gatekeepers right. So I keep calling Gatekeepers table breaker. Sorry, that's why I was like, I automatically second guessed myself because of it. But what I always tried to put in was I never. Mind you, I was still inexperienced at this time, so I haven't gone quite as deep as MarHawkman or James has. But what I usually try to do is put in well, this guy isn't such a bad guy. He's just in a wrong place or a wrong time, or like the case of the alien, he literally misunderstood human rules, and when he killed somebody, it was literally by the fact that he was startled, and he was basically the equivalent of a master mind mage. And of course, humans are squishy creatures.
Generally.
So it was a total accident on his part. So what I always tried to put in the moral quandary of, yeah, he did something wrong, but he's not evil by any means. Make them think, hey, not everything's going to try to kill you. But my players always had the mentality of, if we don't control it to a near slave level, it's going to try to kill us. So we need to kill it first.
That is rather unfortunate. I do like the murderer by accident trope to use, because it does put the burden onto the players of, you know, deciphering what actually happened and how they need to proceed. I do like that one. moving over to Mr. James. So what kind of moral quandaries have you used at your table, and can you explain why?
Well, currently I am running the Enemy Within campaign for Warhammer.
Okay.
And that is nothing but 5 hardbound books of moral quandaries. Like, it starts out with they find mutants eating the passengers from another carriage, and one of the player characters looks identical to one of the corpses. And when they go through the corpse's pocket, they find out that the corpse is supposed to go to Bogenhaven, where he will be given a baronet, 20,000 gold crowns, etc. Right? So that's just the very beginning. I don't want to spoil too much more of it, but moral quandaries they've had, it's been like just crazy things, like when the witch hunter and the fence killed a Skaven, but they can't tell anyone they killed Skavens in the sewers because no one ever lives from telling. You know what I mean? So it's like they want to, but they can't, because, I mean, and honestly, in Warhammer, it's not about being good or bad. It's just shades of bad. Like, the player characters in my group, they're not all good. But compared to the demons, like, they had to flee Bogenhaven because the demon Gideon killed a high-ranking member of the town council and framed them. So they were forced to flee or be hanged for the crime of murder, you know. So, yeah, it's different than D&D. And because the combat is so deadly, the players spend a lot more time investigating, like, what is going on. Plus, it's the old world, so there's a cult behind every corner devoted to some demonic entity or other. So, yeah, I mean, I've just been running this campaign, and it's been doing it for me, honestly.
Nice.
But anyone who's old school and has ever looked at Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, especially the Enemy Within, they'll know what I'm talking about immediately. It's just everyone is a douchebag. Literally.
All right. Shadow, what about you? What kind of moral quandaries do you normally set in front of your players?
That's really tough because it's been literally decades since I've had a group of actual characters or players. You can switch those around either way in this case, that actually have any morals. It's been such a common thing these days, at least with the people I know, to absolutely just not want to be the heroes. Now, fortunately, I do play a Heroes Unlimited campaign from Palladium, to where I could, kind of, squeeze them into that situation. So again, I haven't played that game in years. So it's really hard these days for me to find a group of people that care about anything other than themselves. They may not be evil, but they're definitely selfish and only looking out for themselves. Even the last game I ran with Table Breakers, they weren't interested in being the heroes. They you know what I mean? You were there. They just wanted.
I was there.
They wanted to get the heck out of Dodge, and there wasn't any heroism being there. There were no moral quandaries. I mean, you saw it. I told the players that they'd heard someone screaming for help amongst the wreckage, and the party's just like, la 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 la, just moving right along. So it's really hard for me to answer that one. I'd like to see that, and I'm trying to do that because right now, this last year, I've only DM'd one game, and that was with you guys. And so now I'm just playing. So hopefully later on in this year, when I do run a game, I'll be able to put some in there, maybe grab some ideas from tonight. But I don't know, am I the only one who's noticing that, or is it just like kind of gone out of fashion to want to play the paladin or the goodly ranger or the goodly cleric, or is it just suddenly become nothing but miserable bastard?
I find that to be one of those things where it's like you define the way the world you're playing in is supposed to feel at the beginning of the story, and that sets the tone, and sometimes that will actually guide the players in the right direction. Sometimes.
I think my
Inflating.
game's the way it is because all of the players, I had them all roll their characters up completely random, and almost all of them ended up being some sort of rogue class. So I had like a brigand, a thief, a fence, all of this stuff. So they just immediately started just role playing their characters, as their careers. So they did get into a fight on the Bogan River last Sunday, and they found an orphan child on a raft that had been hidden in a crawl space. And they paid 40 gold crowns to have that young girl put into a good school, like a school where people live, like in medieval times. There's a name for it that I'm forgetting right now.
Like boarding school.
Like a board, exactly. So I guess you can say some of my characters are the good guys, but maybe they just did it because they didn't want to have a kid dragging around with them, a 10-year-old. But 40 gold crowns is a lot of money. And they made a point of saying we want it to be a good boarding school where she'll get a good education and all that. So I guess sometimes they're good.
Compared to most of the players I'm used to, they're good. That child would have been sold to the closest slaver market with my players.
Right. So sometimes they're good.
Okay. And so I'm gonna tangent off that. Like, how do we encourage players to be morally good? Like, how can we as game masters put scenarios in place that kind of direct or offer players to make better choices? Like, is there something that most games are missing, or is this more of a like a players just or game masters just don't know the right scenarios to put them in? So with that, I'm gonna actually start with James on that one. Like, is there? I kind of forgot my own question.
Don't
are
worry,
there any?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think D&D never really. I mean, it does have a thing. Whereas if you don't play your alignment, you could get hosed by the DM. But most people don't enforce that the way they should. And also, you should just ban any player that's playing chaotic neutral. Just kick them off out of the table immediately. But in Warhammer, if you do a bunch of evil shit, you gain corruption. And you can become physically mutated. And now, if a witch hunter happens into you and notices that you bear a few marks of the Chaos Gods, there's a good chance he's going to try and burn you at the stake. So that is kind of a mechanical way of keeping the characters on straight and level, because they can start gaining those chaos corruptions and stuff. But D&D, I just think its DMs are too soft on the players. Like, if somebody's playing a lawful good character and they start doing scumbaggy stuff or allowing other people to do scumbaggy stuff, lawful neutral lose a level. You know what I mean? And
if someone's
like
playing
that.
a paladin, I've done this. Someone was playing a paladin in one of my games, and the enemy that they were fighting threw down their weapons and surrendered, hands up, and the paladin went for a strike anyway, and they became a fighter without feats, and they got upset about it.
The paladin is like trying to be a good paladin, but then the other character is like, I'm going to take the paladin down the hall to see what we can see. And then some other asshole murders all of the prisoners. And then the paladin comes back and it's like, all of these
Paladin
prisoners are now dead, but apparently
well-
you're too stupid to notice.
Well, if so, I have run that situation as well, and well, I've been in that situation as well as a player of a paladin, and if the player's response isn't roll for initiative, and the game master disallows or doesn't, and the game master says, "Yeah, let's do that," if that player's response is "let's roll initiative" because that's going to stop right now.
Right.
Then that player is just, that character is then complicit, and they should become a fighter without feats. Because yeah. So,
But there are a lot of games out there that do have like in-game mechanics that try to keep people good. One of my favorites, Call of Cthulhu. I mean, if you run around doing enough bad stuff, you will literally just go insane. So
Yeah.
and people always think you'll go nuts from seeing like a great old one or something, but like if your character murders another human being, you can lose quite a bit of sanity for that. One of my favorite backdrops is the World War I veteran background for a player character, but the positive is you get to start with a lot of weapon skills and stuff. The negative is you get to start with like half sanity because you saw some shit in the trenches, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it makes sense to me. So I think it's just D&D. It has the mechanics to enforce it. Just most DMs don't actually do it.
Fair enough.
But, yeah.
How about you, crafting? So this is a caveat of the moral quandaries. Like, do you ever, or how do you present scenarios for players to make good choices?
Well, first off, I have to give a little thing about Palladium itself. The Palladium level up system is actually designed for good choices. Helping others, saving a group of people, risking your life literally is part of the level up system. Now, I never encouraged that like I should have. This is along the lines of what GM James just said. GMs got lazy. I unfortunately kind of got a little lazy, but also was kind of ignorant because I was taught, a milestone system to level up in Palladium, which I regret now because it completely ruined as far as I'm concerned, after switching to an experience system, it ruined the system. So experience is much better, at least for Palladium. But what I would at least try to do, which falls on the category of a constantly fail, is little things, which is where I came up with the comment my players would have sold the child. I put a child in the Palladium fantasy universe, orphan child, last survivor of a village. They went to the next village, sold it to the slave market right off the bat. First thing they did. Like, you guys aren't an evil alignment. It's like, we're, well, in this case, I think it would be, I'm not entirely sure what principle would be in D&D. I'd have to read the alignments better, but they were unprincipled. And now I would say an unprincipled wouldn't do that, but then it just like, unprincipled is one step away from the true neutral class in Palladium. That I mean in D&D, that I do know. Because
that doesn't sound like unprincipled to me. That sounds like malignant.
Yeah, like I said, I would have said something. I'd have said something like now, but then I was inexperienced and
like
didn't have a big enough set of balls.
For D&D, chaotic neutral is stretching the line on that one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just recently picked up the Palladium 2nd edition fantasy role-playing rulebook, core book. So I've been reading their alignment system, which is really kind of cool. It's a cool
It's possibly the best alignment system out there.
I'm
If
kind
alignments
of
are your
used
thing.
to it though, because I have Recon and I've had Recon forever, and they're not identical, but there's some overlap. Like you can play the character that's like really good natured and always about helping people. You can play the guy that don't give a crap. You can play the psychotic guy that just wants to murder everybody and wear necklaces and stuff. I mean, so yeah, it's a good alignment system. I'm sorry, I kind of went off.
That's fine. So how about you, Shadow? Oh, you just stepped off screen.
I just wanted to see, is this the one you're talking about there, James?
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great game. Jackie used to love looking at that book as a kid.
Yep,
Just for the
and a
art.
couple of our buddies played the hell out of that game, and we bought little. Do you know the Italeri figures, the little soft plastic 20 millimeter figures? Sure. We bought U.S. Army and BC and NVA because they were like, $8 a box. And we would play with little miniatures on like maps and stuff. It was pretty nuts.
So
it's a good game.
So Shadow, when you are presenting, actually, what kind of things do you do to help your players make better choices? Like what kind of scenarios do you put them in so that they have the opportunity to make better choices?
Honestly, I find that a good row with the local constabulary, law enforcement agencies usually kind of puts them in check. Once they realize that I'm not afraid to use the police or whatever to rain hell down on them for being asshats. They kind of get the hint real quick. Most players respond real well to their own consequences when put to them in that fashion where they get hauled into the pokey or whatever before the judge or something like that after they've literally been trounced and knocked down to one hit point kind of thing. That usually will put them on the straight and narrow, especially early on when I let them know that, the townsfolk ain't going to put up with this. You're doing dumb stuff and you're breaking people's furniture, you're breaking windows, whatever, lighting people on fire. They're not going to run in fear because you guys are the player characters. Especially like in AD&D where the player characters right off the bat had more hit points than just about anybody in the city or the town, except for NPC type of things. It's like no, we ain't playing that way. They're the town's guard. They're not. They don't just have 7, hit points. They're gonna have like 3 times whatever you have. Kind of like in some video games where there's certain NPCs you just cannot mess with. You can take a swing at them and they just laugh. That kind of mentality. You're not getting away with that stuff. But then again, they're still going to try. So every once in a while, drag them back in, throw them in jail, see how they like them apples.
So this question is now to you, Mar. What kind of opportunities do you put in place for players to choose better options?
Well, I didn't do the one about. Yeah. Well, the one about like guiding them towards doing it the right way and not being murder hobos. Well, the specific example I gave earlier is set in a Star Trek setting, and the players are all acting as representatives of Starfleet. Good guys, allegedly, anyways. So, if they do the murder hobo thing, they'll have to explain that to their commanding officers after the mission's over.
And then likely face brig time.
Well, if they live.
Yeah.
Because that's actually the surprise plot twist at the end, is that the reason the Bosliks built this starbase just outside Federation space was because the Tholians had detected that this was a location that could be a future incursion point, and because it's the Tholians who discovered this, and the Federation doesn't trust the Tholians. The Tholians decided to resolve the matter by not bothering to talk to Starfleet about it at all and calling the Bosliks to build a starbase because the Bosliks can do stuff at the edge of Federation space without attracting attention.
Fair enough.
And if you blow up the Boslik starbase, that means that the incursion point ends up opening at the end, and then you have an invasion fleet to shoot holes in you.
Nice. So generally when I am running a table, or even when I'm at a player as a table, some of the things that I like to do and or see is the choice to do good. And one of my game masters, actually he's here in chat, Scott, he often presents many of his encounters with NPCs as potential for recruitment. Like many of my characters over the years has been very much I don't want to fight you. I don't want to kill you. I will hire you or pay you to go away. So when a game master presents the option that NPCs don't actually have to be fought to the death, because who wants to die? Like nobody, even animals, don't want to lose their life. They don't want pain and suffering. So they're going to try to leave as soon as, they start getting hurt. Or in theory, they should. Nobody wants to stick around for that. So, when the opportunity comes up for me as a player to go, hey, you're having a really tough time with us. You are opposing us. I don't understand why. Can I pay you to leave? I know you were paid to get in my way. I will pay you more to leave. Just go away. And if the game master is, seeing that kind of response from a player, they should encourage that. It shouldn't be a fight to the death at all times. If the NPC is like willing to take that option to survive, and who knows, that NPC might come back and stab them in the back someday, but it might be a year from now, it might be 2 years from now. The NPC is like, hey, you remember you killing all of my friends? This is payback. So yes, there is always that possibility. But presenting the possibility for NPCs who aren't necessarily evil, who don't really have a stake in stopping the players, they're just paid to be there. Having that option gives the players a opportunity to do good and not go full down the road of murder hoboism.
That's so funny because that exact thing you described happened in my OSC. No, it was my AD&D campaign. I was running a Deep Dwarven Delve, and the group got ambushed by bugbears. And the bugbears, had to drop on them, but the party was like, hey, wait a minute here. We could kill each other here, or I could give you this sack of gold and you can wander off. And the bugbears took the gold because, it was kind of like the outlaw Josie Wells thing, my words of life and words of death. I think the bugbears could have killed half of them before they all died out. But another thing you said that I think is super important that DMs don't do is most creatures, even sharks, will not hang out if you start putting pain on them. Like I was just watching today on Joe Rogan, if you get bumped by a great white, the worst thing to do is to try and swim away from it because then it perceives you as prey. The best thing to do is to try and grab it by its gill or something and inflict a little hurt on it. And 90% of the time it'll skate away because it's like, oh, that's not food, So I've never understood these cowardly goblins that fight to the death every time, to protect the goblin chief and his chest full of copper coins. It's like, but
your goblins have copper?
If the players do good things, they get XP bonuses. And that's D&D, OSE. It's actually part of Warhammer. Like if the players do something really good, they gain XP bonus. And I think that works great. Whoever was saying milestones were a bad idea, I agree 100%. They're a bad
That would
idea.
be that guy, but I despise them. It's too easy to manipulate that and be the lazy player and just ride on everybody else's coattails. I just you get what you earn. Period.
That depends on how you dispense milestone rewards, but that's not this topic. That's another topic.
Yeah,
so
but I'm just saying,
getting-
like, let's say you're in the middle of something and the players do something good. That also is good for what the adventure is. And you say, okay, you get a bonus 20 XP because you did the thing, right? The other players see that. And now they understand that if they play the game in the right way, they're going to get the bonus XP.
Oh, so it's kind of like, how many of the mission goals did you achieve? You get XP depending on how many goals you achieved, not just whether you survived the mission.
Exactly so. And I've used that technique in AD&D since the 90s. If the players did something that was like really good and important to whatever quests they were on, I would tell the player, hey, man, give yourself an extra 100 XP. And then the other players are motivated by that because, they see the knight did something super knightly and awesome. He got 100 XP. Now I want to get 100 XP. So then, that's all I'm saying.
Well, in Index Card RPG, we actually have a system called hero coins. And as Scott pointed out here, hero points for heroic actions. If you do something heroic, you get some kind of boost or some kind of bonus, be it, small or large. It's appreciated by the player because the GM has then taken the time to go, hey, that thing you did was really awesome. It was really great. And I want you to keep doing that. And it reinforces good play and good play behavior. Even with ICRPG being a milestone-based advancement system or advancement game, you still have the option to reward these coins, these hero points, to players for doing good things, and then they can use those coins or hero points to help them out later on in the evening or later on in a different session.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's just a good idea. For me, it's always just XP, but the hero coin thing is a good idea. In Warhammer, they do have fate points that you can spend to try to not die or something. And the only way to get a fate point back once you spin it is you have to do something like super heroic. Otherwise, once you spend all your fate points, you're done. And then, and then death is right around the corner because you can burn a fate point to prevent a hit that might kill you. So,
nice.
So
when we are talking about non-villainous adversaries, and building out these, building out their story, building out all the things that they're doing or trying to accomplish, do we ever plan or do we ever have certain outcomes that we like to plan for, if at all? So Mar, I'm going to start with you on this one. Do you ever have an idea of what the ideal outcome is for your non-villainous NPCs or adversaries?
Well, in this particular case, the Bosliks are just doing what the Tholians paid them to do. And they're not actually doing anything that's harmful to the players. So the obvious one here is just for the players to be like, oh, so that's what you're here to do. Fine, I guess we'll help you with that. Because, it's like the people that aren't being trusted by the players here are the Tholians. But the Tholians aren't the ones that the players are actually talking to. And,
Okay.
Again, the Tholians actually had a good reason for what they did. It's just that the players don't trust them. So, and
okay,
it's one of those things where it's like you have this obvious tack of like you're not supposed to be here, and therefore we find that suspicious, but it's like, okay, are you going to investigate first or shoot first and not bother asking questions because you won't be able to ask questions after you shoot?
And do you ever have an ideal outcome for that kind of situation? Or did you have an ideal outcome for that situation?
Well, this one obviously is like preventing the incursion from happening would be the absolute best option because, well, the way it ended up actually working out is that the incursion opened because you didn't help the Boslicks with what they were messing with. Then again, the Boslicks aren't exactly cooperative, so figuring out how to talk them into telling you what they're doing is the real challenge here. But
okay,
the way it ends up working out though is that the rift opens and the Boslicks close it after only a few enemy ships pop through, which you blow those up and then it's done.
Okay. So Shadow, how about you? Do you ever have an ideal outcome for non-villainous adversaries? Do you ever present it in such a way that there is an ideal outcome for the players and the adversary?
I'm not sure what you mean by I.
So in my first example, where the players are sent out to stop Robin of Locksley, because they don't know who Robin of Locksley is and they don't know the situation of what's going on. So in that situation, the ideal outcome that I have in mind as a game master is that they stop Robin of Locksley from stealing the tax money, so it does get to its destination, but they don't necessarily kill him and start trying to figure out a better way forward. Like, that to me is the most ideal outcome, even though it's idealistic and likely not to happen. That's to me the most ideal outcome.
See, for me, it's more likely, at least in my experience, for that non-villainous to become villainous, or for the players to become more villainous, I should say, depending on the situation. The players are going to rail against everything, in my experience. You could try to play the NPC off as not the bad guy, but they're going to perceive him as the bad guy. If anything's in their way, they just, they barrel through it. If the players are actually the heroes and there's a guy, I'll try to, drop some clues as to the fact that, this isn't really a bad guy, but it doesn't always work out that way. So for ideal, my players tend to, go their own way, so to speak. So there's no ideal situation. If I try to, steer it in a certain direction, it rarely works out because the players are just going to, pick up on clues that, maybe I'd like this to happen, and they're just going to, go right the hell around that, or, make a 180-degree turn and go away from that. But that's one of the problems with playing with the same group for a very long time. They pick up on your clues, that poker face isn't so pokery after, a decade or so.
Fair. All right. So I'm going to go down to James here. Do you ever have an ideal outcome for your non-villainous or non-evil type of adversaries?
Absolutely. And this has happened multiple times in games I've run even recently. The ideal for me is that the party and the NPC will somehow become friends. And that's that's happened a few times. As a matter of fact, it happened recently, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago. A pickpocket tried to steal from the master thief, in the group and got caught. I mean, like right off the bat, he got caught. So instead of this turning into, well, I'm going to turn you into the city guard or I'm going to kill you or something, the halfling Tuck was all like, hey, dude, you need some help. And kind of tucked the guy under his wing, you know, and started using the NPC as kind of like, hey, go, you know, sending him to go grab stuff and stuff like that. I like when the players end up getting over whatever the conflict was and then realizing that they can help each other out, the player and the NPCs. And that's happened quite a few times recently. The other time is they captured a naked dwarf that was running through town, really drunk, and he had been put in the stocks, and they paid to have the dwarf let out of the stocks early. So then this naked dwarf become like their best friend, and he's still hanging out with the group, and that's been like 3 months now, because he's like, he feels super indebted to the halfling for paying the couple silver shillings it costs to get him out of the stocks. So now we've got this this dwarf running around doing stuff. So I mean, you can see a reoccurring thing that happens. You know, my players like to talk a lot. Even when they fought
Nothing wrong with that.
That set them up for murder, there was like a conversation before it turned into you know, like, my players talk a lot. They want to talk to every NPC. They want to know everything about them, like who they're related to, all of it, you know, so, which is cool, you know, but half of my group are females too. So they're into like deep immersion NPC versus, you know, and my brother's character recently tried to seduce a woman in a bar, and he succeeded so high that she fell in love with him. But she's a good girl and she wouldn't put out. So he said, well, okay, then never mind. So then it broke her heart and she was crying and she ran out of the place. So then he ran her down and said he would marry her. So guess what? He's married now. You know, his character's name, Maximilian Cortez, now married to Sarissa Lubenstein of Nome. So that's the kind of weird stuff that goes on in my game.
As a player, I can definitely relate. I've had those kinds of situations happen to me, though I wasn't trying. It just kind of happened.
Well, his character has the attractive trait, and he rolled a 0.5 on his fellowship.
That'll do it.
And what the attractive trait allows you to do is you can use either digit of your roll as your success level. So he got to roll like it might have been 09. So he got 9 success levels, which is above and beyond what anyone should ever get. So he's married now, but the good news is he's in Altdorf at the wizard school studying shadow magic.
Nice.
And I've already decided if he does her wrong, she's going to summon a shadowy beast to rip him to little pieces.
Absolutely. You know, that right there is a non-villainous adversary if he crosses her.
Yeah, if he cheats on her, she's going to send a shadow fiend after him, and it'll go wrong because hell has
it sounds like she could become a villainess if she's studying that kind of magic. Just saying.
Well, shadow magic in Warhammer is not bad. It's just the ability to manipulate shadows. So you can use it to teleport yourself from one shadow to another shadow. And then at higher levels, you can actually summon beasts made out of shadows.
Sounds like someone read the last thing.
But they're more like energy constructs than actual demons, though, I guess.
Right, exactly. They're constructed of the that wind of magic. There's 8 winds of magic,
right?
And shadow is just one of them.
Nice.
So none of them are innately evil of the 8 winds, but like necromancy or demonology, that's just straight up evil. So, you know.
Okay, so how about you, Crafting? Do you ever have a plan for an ideal outcome for your non-villainous adversary?
Yes, the first couple of times I tried, and then after that I learned it was pointless. But
Okay,
bring back to
but
the
why is it
alien.
pointless?
Because of what Scott said earlier.
Because, yeah, I'd say more along the lines of what Shadow said. Once the characters have a certain idea in their head, they just like, fuck that. Oh, sorry, not discussing this. Sorry. Anyway, like I said about the alien before,
Worse has been said.
Yeah, that is true. When it came to the alien, what the outcome was supposed to be was they confronted the alien, they fought slightly, realized the alien is trying very hard not to kill them, and then help the alien return to space before the government can find him. And it was supposed to lead into an eventual space campaign where they have a contact in space. They find him by random roll. They find him crying over the fact that he accidentally killed someone. They literally took advantage of that, beat him nearly to death, and sold him to the government.
Yikes. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And this was a Heroes Unlimited
Wow.
campaign, so they weren't even supposed to be villains.
That sounds pretty villainous to me.
Like Heroes Unlimited, and yeah.
This is one of those where I really have to question, like, are you sure you're playing on the right team here?
You know, I have had to ask myself as a player that on several occasions. You know, and sometimes I do that as a wellness check, you know, especially if I'm playing like a paladin. Like, am I the good guy? Like, is what I am doing good? And I have to kind of like balance it, you know, in terms of the game. Like, as a paladin, am I actually doing the right thing? You know, I know a lot of my game masters do enforce the paladin code of conduct, and I thank them for doing so. But when the code of conduct is not being enforced, I have to do that wellness check myself to go, am I actually playing a paladin? Am I actually doing all the things that make a paladin a paladin? And if at any time I say, no, I don't think I am, I deserve to not be a paladin. You know, just by the rules of that paladins have to play by. And I've only had that happen to me once, where I was traveling with a character who, though they weren't evil by alignment, they were doing some really shady things. And I'm like, I did that friendship or that relationship between my paladin and that character's got to end. And if that means my character has to leave the party and I have to roll up a new character, that's what has to happen. And eventually the player did learn, like, oh, I'm doing some really shady things and I'm the reason the paladin left. Like, the player did eventually realize it.
In Crafting's player's defense, if you're playing like a Heroes Unlimited game and you're Heroes of Earth, so to speak, that I can see how the players would. You're an alien, period. You know, that's above our pay grade. We're pushing the buck forward to our superiors and let them deal with you. So yeah.
Well, slightly on the human side of things, and this was a crash ship of multiple aliens. One of the aliens that was there was a demon type alien, and he took over a company. The players bombed the building, collapsing and killing hundreds of people, all to bring down this one creature then basically their logic was, if they let that creature control them, then they're all evil.
Yeah, I think they may have missed a point somewhere.
That is some top tier murder hoboing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually liked your story about the paladin, though, because it leaves open the chance that at some future date the paladin could re-enter the party, and now this player has redeemed himself. So he's not going to be a shady bastard and run the paladin. Maybe, he learned his lesson. He learned how to be a better person.
That was towards the very, very end of the game that he had learned that. When the party itself, like the whole party, said, "We cannot stand your character's actions any further," and the whole party voted to basically evict the character. Like, we can't travel with you. You are not a good person. You're not the person we started with. Until you are the person we started with, until you recover who you are, we are banishing you from the party.
Damn.
That is when the light bulb came on.
Split happens.
Hmm?
Hey, I allow PvP in my game.
Some game masters do, some game masters don't. And I know we've talked about it here on Gatekeepers about PvP. I can't remember what episode it was, but if you are going to allow PvP, make sure it's respectful and leave personal emotion out of it. If you resort to PvP, or if the players need to resort to PvP, if it happens, just remind everybody, hey, we're all friends at the table, and your character's actions are your character's actions, not the player's actions. Don't make it personal.
Yeah.
The moment you start taking it personally, that's when the game stops. And everyone takes a night off, takes a couple weeks off, and comes back at it fresh. Never make personal attacks at the table ever. It just does not go well.
Well, it's not personal attacks aren't always the issue. I'll make this brief. Kevin Semina has a story of a guy completely crazy, good friends of a non-crazy person. The crazy person basically makes a deal with a demon to try to save both their lives because they couldn't kill it. The demon says, "Okay, kill your friend." In his insanity, he pretends to attack. The demon says, "Ha, very funny. That's not going to work." So legitimately lops off his friend's arm, feed it to the demon, which was good enough. Problem is that in real life, the guy whose character's arm was lopped off, he literally jumped over the table. No personal attacks. It was just he was so invested in the moment that he just lost control.
Yeah. And that then it becomes the game master's responsibility to keep things level, like keep everyone level. So getting back onto the topic of non-villainous adversaries. No, you're fine. We do get off topic occasionally. It does happen, as long as it's relevant. So when we are discussing non-villainous adversaries, we know what the villainous adversaries rewards are. Like we know as game masters and players, when you defeat a villainous adversary, you get their stuff, you get their horde, you get their, all of their things. But what about the rewards for non-villainous adversaries? Like, what do you offer your players as a reward for not defeating the guy, for not, turning them into a greasy smear on the floor? Like, what can the reward possibly be? And Crafting, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Well, my favorite one that I never got to implement but always wanted to was the favor. Like, oh, you spared me, or you whatever, or like example, the alien, if they decided not to kill him and help him get back to space, when they went to the space part of the campaign I had planned for them, he was going to basically say, hey, you can use my ship until you can get your own. So it was going to be a favor for saving him. And they have several scenarios where if you didn't kill this particular NPC for whatever reason, they'd come back and pay you back somehow later.
Awesome. What about you, Shadow? What are some of your favorite rewards that you offer for players who aren't facing a true villain? Like, what are the rewards that they could possibly even earn?
Besides, the obvious material gains or something like that, I'm going to go with servitude.
Okay.
I spared your life. Now you're working for me. Just plain and simple, a very famous character, also with the same name as myself, Shadow. That's something that would happen quite often. He would spare the people, the non-villainous adversaries, let's say, someone who maybe worked for the villain or something like that. and he would then put them to work. Now you're working for me. You're part of my, underground network, and that alone, could come with, more contacts, more information, access to getting into places because someone looks the other way, all kinds of things like that.
Okay, fair enough. So James, what kinds of rewards do you make available to players who aren't trying to just murder hobo their way through and will actually talk to NPCs that are their adversary?
Well, I mean, obviously, we've already talked about the XP bonuses for, not behaving like a jackass, but there's also the fact that they could make friends. And while I'm not going to say my players are as hardcore as Shadow is about the whole "you work for me now," whether you like it or not, bum. But yeah, you might make a friend who has a skill or knows something that could come in useful at some point in the future. So that's basically a big part of it. I mean, if you end up killing the guy, then you just get whatever's in his pockets, which, might just be a couple bronze pennies and a knife, you never really know. But yeah, friends. You make friends.
Awesome. Mar, how about you? What kinds of rewards do you offer players for not being murder hobos and killing the non-villainous type of adversary?
Well, I mean, honestly, and the way I set up that one scenario, the real reward is living, honestly. But
Okay.
the other side of that one though is that because of the fact that the entire adventure is framed as you being a Federation officer, you're kind of sort of just doing your job, and that's, well, you're not getting loot for completing the mission. If you did pick up stuff like that, it would kind of sort of all just be,
Funneled back to the Federation.
Yeah, so because it's one of those like you're not random hobos doing odd jobs. You're officially sanctioned law enforcement type people.
Oh, well,
But
here you go. Scott asks, what is the reward in real life for being a decent person and making friends?
well, I
Hopefully
mean,
lasting friendships.
if we're gonna go, it's just like the things that the kind of sort of thing I would do in a different story, perhaps. Well, there are several examples from Superman comics where Superman talks bad guys into stopping being bad guys and actually doing something useful with their lives. So, there's that possibility, I guess.
Yeah. So some of the things I like to reward my players with is intel. Bad guys, the adversary might have intel that the players could gain advantage in the next scenario on. They could, again, gain an ally. They could gain someone who has a certain skill set that they just don't have, that they could use or exploit to their heart's content. Other examples of rewards that might go a long way is, even if the NPC is now not trying to kill them, they could be working for them and pumping out more damage than some of the other PCs can. Like I've had that happen with some of the characters I've hired. I've hired multiple different fighters over the years as a player to be part of the group and get a quarter share of my loot. Like, okay, yeah, you know what? You work for me. I'll give you a share of my, of the reward. And, you can work your way up to being a full member of the group. In that case, yeah, sure, I'm losing a little bit of pay. I don't really care. I've got too much anyway. And, the individual keeps my character safe because I'm typically playing a caster of some kind. So I am very squishy, and I don't like being in combat, and I don't like having somebody trying to swing a big metal stick in my face. So I will go out of my way as a caster, especially, to hire NPCs that were trying to kill me moments ago, because I will keep them fed, I'll keep them housed, I'll keep them, paid. So long as they're willing to work for me. Granted, it's a double-edged sword because I know where their loyalties lie. Their loyalties lie with coin, and as long as I'm the highest bidder, they work for me.
That reminds me of something that's come up in some of the Hyperborea games I've played. Is you have this random NPC who you like. Okay, we've decided we're not going to kill you. Are you interested in being our servant or something?
Mm-hmm. But the NPC, the non-adversarial NPC, once they have achieved their goal, or even come close to achieving their goal through the NPCs either stopping them and helping them to achieve, even if it's like a small portion of their goal, if the NPC is satisfied with the outcome, they stop being an adversary. And once they stop being an adversary, they may be willing to help the party. And that help could be almost anything. If the NPC's goal was to get noticed and, bring attention to a corrupt government official, they have done their job by pointing it out to the PCs, and now the PCs might have the power to do something about it. If they do something about it, they've gained a different kind of ally, an ally that will not only, stand behind them firmly in whatever they do, but also have their back if they need a place to fall back to because they went against a corrupt political foe. So, the party, as at the start of the show, I said, if the party's hired by the Sheriff of Nottingham to go out and stop Robin of Locksley, they find out, Robin's actually not a bad guy and he's trying to do good in his region. They might go, okay, we'll take the tax wagon back to the sheriff this time, but we're going to start actively working against the individual the correct way, trying to go up the chains of command, because they might have the clout to do so. And if things, fall apart, or if the, sheriff becomes their new adversary, now they've got a place they can go hang out. Now they've got a place in the woods that they can go retreat to, and a friend available to them.
And there's always the Magna Carta.
No, yeah.
Yes. Of course,
Yes.
the king.
Yep.
I'm going to take off, guys, but it's been wonderful
Yeah.
being on this show. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. See
Yeah.
you later.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's good to actually hear MarHawkman. He's been around forever, but I don't think I've ever heard his voice. But
Well, he's a member of the Gatekeepers now, so if ever you want to check out the show and give us a watch, he should be here from week to week, depending on if he's got anything for the topic. So
nice. Catch you guys later.
Yep. Thank you for hanging out with us. So, so we've kind of spoken to some of the rewards, but let's talk about some of the solutions to the outcomes. Now, some of this might sound a bit railroadish, and for some of us out there, we might need a more railroady game, especially for newer game masters who haven't learned all of the ropes that some of us have learned, sometimes the hard way. And they might need more structured campaign, a more structured story. So a lot of times, especially when I was much younger as a game master and much more inexperienced, I had ideas of what the solutions to the problems were. Like I had an idea in my head that I was trying to give clues for my players to kind of get there, kind of get to the solutions I had. And I didn't really leave a lot of gray room in my solutions. And I as a game master was always frustrated that they weren't understanding the clues I was putting down or understanding the outcomes I was trying to get them to. So in that, I had to learn to leave gray room, and lots of gray room, for my players to kind of expand and go into. So I guess my question to you guys is, when you are developing these adversaries and developing these situations, do you leave a lot of gray room, or is it cut and dry, black and white with the outcomes? I'm going to start this one with Crafting Gamer.
I'm perfectly honest, I didn't even know when I first started that you could do a railroady game. I've said this before, but I was slightly taken advantage of by the guy who taught me how to GM. So basically what he taught me is that the only style of gaming is sandboxy, or not even sandboxy, really just straight open world, where the players can do whatever they want and you GM really has no real power. So I never even tried without. No, I just never even tried, because for the longest time I was under pressure and I couldn't. So this is the one part of the subject I don't have much to say on.
Oh, that's fine.
I think that can work out if you set up the scenario that way, is to basically do Mad Libs the TTRPG. I'm actually in the process of trying to figure out how to set up that sort of thing for Thundar the Barbarian, because that was a rather formulaic TV show, and mixing and matching plot elements from different episodes might be hilarious to play through. But if the scenario is set up that way, it works that way. If the scenario is not set up that way, it doesn't work that way. It's all about how you set up the scenario the players are playing.
Fair. How about you, Shadow? Do you ever have like black and white solutions for your scenarios, or do you have large areas of gray room for your players to go expand into? You're muted, sir.
I kind of learned early on that you need a mix of both. You can have the ideal, like you said earlier, way to solve the problem. You put this key in, you turn it, and problem solved. But never forget that you're dealing with, 2, 3, 6, maybe 8 other players, all with different thoughts going on in their heads, and maybe one of them comes up with, or you should hope that they're going to come up with other solutions. That's kind of the fun for me, is to see what they're going to pull out of their, pockets, let's just say, to solve the problem in a way that you didn't. And maybe that's even a better solution. Maybe especially if they've missed a clue, then you're like, crap. Well, they're coming up to the boss chamber. What are they going to do? They didn't get that one special widget. How are they going to beat the boss? Well, let's see what happens, because that's part of the game aspect. You can't just go okay, make a roll because you screwed up. Okay, well, you realize, and then tell them you realize you need this one other thing, so you better go back. I'm not doing that. If they run into the room and they forgot something and they need to improvise, I'm there along for the ride. I want to see what happens just as well as they do. And if they can come up with something, that's just as good, cool. Because I always look at my games as if someone else is watching from outside, not the players, not the GM, but like an audience, and how you would tell the story. If one of my players goes off and tells the story to somebody else, or one of my players wants to start writing it, as a novel or something like that, I want to, make sure that there's room that the viewer would be able to follow along and enjoy it, and not just go, oh, they're just going to go with the, the obvious answer kind of thing, so that it is more unique. Even to me as the GM, I'm like, I wasn't expecting that. That's fantastic. All right, let's roll with it. Let's see what happens. Maybe roll some dice, or check your skills, or what have you, and kind of wing it.
Yeah, all really great answers. And like I said, I used to be very much a cut and dry person, very much a cut and dry game master, and I learned from my mistakes, my failings, that I had to leave a lot of unplanned ideas, or a lot of unplanned outcomes, because I don't know the minds of my players. I don't know every thought they're going to have. I'm not a mind reader. None of us are. So we can't necessarily plan for every potential outcome. We can only plan for certain outcomes. And in that, depending on the outcome the players decide to pursue or force, what if any additional clues or plot threads do you make available to your players? That might be linked to larger or advancing elements of the game itself. Like, that's something I didn't really ever conceive, was like, they might open doors to something that I hadn't planned for. The doors that are supposed to be locked along the corridor, they're like, nope, I'm going to force the lock. Well, now I've got to come up with something. So do you ever have the situation where, because the players forced a certain outcome that they wanted to see, that led into further arcing plots within your game? Shadow, I'm going to start with you on that one.
All the freaking time. Part of running a sandbox is, kind of, just staying one step ahead of the players and being able to improvise real quick, especially, after decades of running. You can come up with something really quick. They're gonna maybe take one of your red herrings and just go off on it, and instead of turning it into a complete and monumental waste of time, maybe build on it as they're going through it, and maybe take a break, when everybody else is out there, having a smoke or something. You ponder it, see what you can do with it, and make it, still a little bit of a red herring, but it also actually leads to another avenue of success as opposed to just a big dead end, because that's one or two of those in a night, and you can really stall the game out really, really bad. So just stay one step ahead of them, and practice, and obviously, for those of you who do that, keep your notes handy, and make notes for those instances where they did something, and you weren't planning on it, and it because it was so, rule of coolish or just interesting, that you're like, I'm gonna bring this back later. Maybe it's an NPC or a monster that got away, or just some little foreshadowing of the next adventure, maybe.
Okay. What about you, crafting? Do you ever have situations where your players have forced a certain outcome that you had not even thought as a possibility, that has led into further campaign arcs or further gameplay?
So much. For a little while there, I was just saying, here's the world, go right ahead, do whatever the heck you want. There's no way I can plan for what you're going to do.
Okay.
This is most of the stories I've been talking about is with my primary group, the group I played with for 6 years, and then I haven't talked much about any of those other groups. In the other groups, I did actually experience 2 or 3 times where a player did something I wasn't expecting, and it actually did benefit. What did he do? It's been so long. Crud, I can't remember. Oh, right. He wanted to see it. Actually, it's very similar to what you're talking about. He wanted to get past a lock he wasn't supposed to. Now, it wasn't like, oh, you can't do this because it's plot armor. It's just the fact that he wasn't supposed to at his level type thing. I was making it almost Fallout-y, where you can't pick certain level locks. But I was just saying, he tried, he failed, and I was going to say he can only do that once. He's got to come back when he has more experience of what he's doing. He turns around, comes back with a 6-foot dude, and basically says, "Bolt on the door for me," which didn't work the first time. But the second time, the door cracked enough that they felt they could get through, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let them have this. But it turned out to be really, in the fact that it turned out really good, because this huge dude, I didn't intend him to be anything at all. He just kind of got pulled off the street. The character literally said, "I'm going to look for the biggest dude I can find." So he did, and this guy came his best friend to the point the NPC sacrificed his life to save the character.
Oh wow!
I didn't actually intend that to happen, but the player loved the attitude. I gave him it basically made Mr. T from the A Team.
Nice. Okay.
And he loved that character so much. He just stuck with. He like, hey, can you? Basically said, can we be friends? And they just started hanging out.
Nice.
That's nice.
That's quite the unexpected reward, really.
Yeah.
Kind of what this question's about. So, Mar, how about you? Have you ever had scenarios that your players forced an outcome that you just didn't think was even in the cards? And did it lead to further game elements or even plot arcs themselves?
I've never had any unexpected outcomes that actually led to something like that. It's like, I mean, having players surprise you, sure, that's definitely going to happen. It's just, in my case, it's just not something that comes up where it's something that gets quite that interesting, I guess you'd say.
Okay, fair. For me, in relation to the non-villainous adversaries, I had presented a series of puzzles to my players. The entire dungeon or temple or whatever you want to call it, that the players were going through, the person who had set it before, had built this place, wanted to test the next potential holder of power that they had. So they wanted to know whether or not the individuals were smart enough to get through his labyrinth of intellectual puzzles. And one of my players did something I was not prepared for, and I was very inexperienced as a game master at that point. I was very young, and I didn't understand how to get around or how to accept the answer. And the answer was, the answer came from a book I had not thoroughly read. And it was a magic spell that I didn't understand what it did and how it was to be used. And I am like, whoa, wait, what? So, props to the player who had done the homework and had done the research on the magic to understand how it worked and how to get out of the situation. Like, again, I hadn't planned for it. I'm like, well, okay, you could logic your way through the puzzle and you logic your way to the right answer, but they came up with a solution and it worked. So, in the end, they still succeeded, and it didn't really come into play again, unfortunately. But as it turns out, it didn't really need to come into play or further in elements into the game, because the players went a completely different route than I had originally thought was going to happen. Beyond even that, so now we come to the point of, what if the quest giver is actually the villain? So the quest giver who sent the players off on their adventure against the non-villain adversary, and made the non-villain the adversary to begin with, so is that NPC or that quest giver your true villain? Or are they so unassailable as that the players can't actually touch them? Do you ever use that as the trope that it is? Mara, I'm going to start with you. Is your quest giver ever the true villain?
I have done stories where the quest giver had ulterior motives that they didn't tell you about. But I've never set up one where the quest giver is actually the real bad guy. I mean, I've seen people do that, and it can work out in interesting ways. I just have never actually personally written a scenario where I use that idea.
And as Shadow's pointing down, Scott Clark says, "We are the villains in someone else's story." Yes, sometimes we are. So what about you, Crafting? Are your quest givers ever actually the main villain in disguise?
Well, now we go right back to the story of the demon alien, because the demon alien got a hold of the head of the company and took over the company. He was giving the instructions to the players to catch the non-aggressive alien. Now, to twist the story even further, because these players sucked, they found out the demon alien was controlling the company before they went after the non-aggressive alien, and still did what they did to the non-aggressive alien.
Whoops. Well. Wow, murder hobos as heroes.
TCG, don't take this the wrong way, but you need new players, and I can see why you came to us.
I haven't played with that group in a long time.
Well, the thing you said about blowing up the building, trying to kill the demon alien, reminds me of something that's a trope that they've sometimes done in Superman-related comics, where someone's decided that they want to kill someone who's a Kryptonian and just blows the building up. And then the Kryptonian is just standing in the ruins of the building. It's like, okay, you pissed me off. Now what do you want?
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Let's say that's pretty much what happened. The alien did not die in the initial blast. Wasn't even that badly damaged.
So what about you, Shadow? Is your quest giver ever actually the villain in the story of the non-adversarial or non-villainous adversary?
It's too good a trope to pass up on. It really, really is. You know, you get that moment where they can go, "Are we the baddies?" You know, you got to do it once in a campaign. Maybe at the beginning, maybe toward the end. But if you don't use it at least once in a campaign, you are missing out on some classic fun. It's there's so many great ways that it can, turn around and bite the players in the butt, or lead them on to something even better, like a quest you hadn't planned on, or maybe they get double the reward because they get all his stuff too. They figure out, he's the bad guy. Well, now that we've defeated him, what do you have? And since he was, handing out quests and what have you, he probably had some good stuff, money, bank accounts, magic items,
A journal with information that people in 5 different kingdoms would kill to have.
Sure, that's a good one too.
Yeah, and the other non-villainous adversary that comes to mind actually comes from the Princess Bride. Inigo Montoya. He was not actually a villain. He was an adversary to the hero, but he wasn't a villain. And once the dread pirate Roberts or Wesley gained him as a friend, like they traveled together all the way to the end of the film. So you can really go to some of the books and read up on adversaries that were actually not villainous at all. They were just happened to be in opposition of what the hero was trying to accomplish through either circumstance, happenstance, or those are the same thing, aren't they? But through either circumstance or through needs, or their goals just happen to be opposed to one another. But doesn't mean the hero needed to end them. It means the hero needed to find another path forward. And really, that's, to me, the makings of really great players, is players who can go, hey, is there any other path forward than death?
Well, one of the most amusing memes I've seen this week was someone on one of the discords posted a picture of the team from The Princess Bride towards the end of the movie, and it was that whole like show me the real D&D party. No, I meant the real
Oh,
D&D
yes,
party.
yes,
It's
yes.
like oh, so it starts with a picture of the ones from the D&D movie, then starts with a picture of the ones
Yeah,
from
I
Lord
saw
of the
that
Rings.
too.
But it's like
And then finally, yeah.
it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, that totally tracks with how D&D parties
So,
actually play out.
I'm going to turn this to the audience real quick. You in the audience, thank you one for being here with us this evening. Without you, we would just be talking to the void. Do you have any thoughts or questions about non-villainous adversaries that we may not have covered? I'm, willing, we the panel are willing to answer whatever questions you may have available. Yes, Shadow.
Scott, last comment. The answer is absolutely.
You mean this one?
Yep.
Yes. If you're
Well,
playing the
no, wait.
villains,
Rewind. No, because sometimes if you're playing the villain, then you gotta deal with the other villains, like the villains that are above you and their minions below you. So pretty much if you're playing an evil campaign, everybody is just an adversary.
I'm not sure I follow that one. Proto League of Doom was noticed all of the evil deeds and consolidated power. I'm not sure I follow that.
Who's the League of Doom? Maybe you can clarify with that. It sounds like
He,
a
he
group of
might be talking
superhero.
about the DC Comics team.
Oh,
Legion of Doom?
Yeah,
Legion of Doom. Okay. No one has noticed all the evil deeds and consolidated power.
but
Yeah, I'm not sure.
the actual backstory behind the Legion of Doom is that these Super Friends and or Justice League, depending on which continuity it is, didn't actually realize they were an evil bad guys team until quite a while after they'd put the team together, because they didn't publicly announce the existence of the Legion of Doom. They kept it a secret and tried to hide it from the heroes. It's just that over time, the heroes kept having bad guys show up to help other bad guys more and more.
Right. So, if there are no further comments, questions, or concerns on this topic, we'll go ahead and get our outros this evening. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to all of the channels, and I will get Mr. James's channel in the links below. Thank you for watching, and Shadow, what have you got going on tomorrow?
Tomorrow,
Or this
Thursday,
week,
I'll be
rather.
doing part 4 of When Did Fun Become a Four-Letter Word, followed by hanging out with you tomorrow on Table Breakers. Friday evening, I'll be doing part 5, as well as being in a game with Bo from Bo Paints Minis. If you haven't checked out his channel, go check it out. He's a great guy. And then Saturday, I will be doing my sci-fi shadow chat. Not sure what the topic is. And then after that, of course, I'll be hanging out with Nathan from the Quantum Show with Nathan Allen, where we will probably be talking about Project Bluebeam or UFOs or the paranormal. I do a bunch of that. I'm also on a radio show during the week. It's actually airing right now. Fortunately, we did a pre-record so that it can air at the same time. But normally it would be on Wednesdays. That's why sometimes I've asked Jade to do the show earlier. And then Sunday, of course, we'll be hanging out with our good friend Connell, discussing one of the great back-to-school movies that has completely escaped me. So just check out his channel.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, thank you. That's what it is. I need to write that down because I have not seen that movie in a good long time.
I just took a guess.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I'll have to go double check with the guys, but That's what I got
great fun.
going for this week. That's what I got going this week. And next week, I'm going to start reviewing, believe it or not, Dark Sun. It's been a long time since I looked into those books, and I found something rather unique that most Dark Sun players didn't even know existed. So I'm going to show that off Tuesday, and then on with the rest of the week. You know.
Awesome.
So how about you, TCB?
All right, to you. Yeah, to you, Crafting.
This Saturday, I have the first of the Robotech RDF manual videos. It is going to be on the optional rules and random roll tables, such as where you're going to hit.
Awesome.
And I don't think it'll be this week. I was trying to get it out this week, but I'm focusing more on my RPGs than I am my Magic. Yep, that's the one. I'm focusing more on my RPGs over Magic the Gathering, so that's been pushed back probably another week.
Fantastic. Okay. What about you, Mar?
I've been planning to do a video about the character Naya from Devil Girl from Mars and the storytelling tropes that were used in that old movie.
I just watched that movie. That's so weird, dude. I'm not even kidding. That's the black and white.
Yeah, it's this 70-year-old movie that was shot in black and white.
I literally just watched that last month on YouTube. That's so funny.
Well, that's actually interesting because like the whole like reason why I thought of that was because YouTube just like randomly recommended that I watch the movie. A few weeks ago.
Really, man, we're suckers for that
Nice.
shit, aren't we? They got our number,
So-
man.
Oh well.
And you can catch me, as Shadow said, tomorrow over on Table Breakers at Bruce Lombardo's channel or at Baron G-Rock's channel. So check us out there. I think we're still going to be talking about psionics versus magic. I'll have to watch the episode or listen to it tomorrow and get caught up because I was at Gen Con.
You're gonna get shocked. I left Kai speechless in a way that you wouldn't actually expect. So yeah.
Well, then I'll definitely have to check it out. So, thank you again for watching, and if again you haven't done it, consider subscribing to these channels. And if you really like this episode, show that support with a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. So, have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you next week, hopefully with a new and good topic.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.